Hey everybody, good evening. It's 5:30, so I'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll still have some other folks logging in, but I wanted to be respectful of everybody's time. My name is Carolyn Lamparella. I am the program director for Preferred EAP, and I thank you so much for your willingness to be with me this evening. We are going to be talking about mental health habits that last a lifetime in honor of May being Mental Health Month. This is part of a series that is being offered through LVHN. For Preferred EAP, we also have our corporate customers invited to participate as well. We are going to be recording, and we'll send out this PowerPoint after the conclusion. Just to let you know, as we're going through, if you have questions, if you'll notice there is a question tab, please just note your questions in that tab, and at the end I'll be sure to stop and take a look at those and answer any questions you might have. My colleague Ashley is assisting me today, and she will be forwarding my slides. If you have any technical issues, once again, go ahead and put something in the question tab, and she'll try to sort that out for you. Okay, with that, let's move on to the first slide, Ashley. So as I said, May is Mental Health Month, so I thought it was appropriate for us to begin with the definition of mental health. What are we really talking about when we talk about mental health? Certainly, mental health has gotten a lot of press in the last 3 years, especially now post-COVID. We're hearing a lot of concerns about the mental health of really everyone, and in particular, our youth who have become more and more isolated post-COVID. So much so that the Surgeon General issued a report, if you haven't seen it, on the next epidemic of loneliness, right? And certainly we can see how that evolved from COVID. We now have a hybrid workforce. We are all accustomed to gathering in this virtual space, right? Which is wonderful. There's been a lot of pluses that have emerged from that, opportunities to connect, but we're also dealing with the lack of community, the lack of connection. And so I think it's really appropriate for us to really think about, what do we mean when we talk about somebody having good mental health? Well, when our mental health is strong, we have the ability to realize our own potential, right? We can cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively, and contribute to our community, right? That's sort of a global definition of mental health, and something we are certainly all striving for, and we want that to be the case for everybody, right? This is really about mental health for everybody. You can move to the next slide. Now let's take a closer look at what we mean by mental illness, right? The mental health is sort of the broader concept, and within that we talk about mental illness, which really is when our mental health has gone awry and we're struggling to cope with the stressors. It's impacting our day-to-day functioning, right? It can be an occasional, sometimes these are situational. People who are experiencing grief or loss may go through a period where they feel depressed or anxious, and it may not last, or it could be chronic, right? These are conditions that could begin at a young age and persist throughout adulthood. Sometimes they're present, sometimes they're not, right? It really varies. But when we're talking about mental illness, we're talking about situations that persist, right? That persist for more than just a few days, more than the normal fluctuations of life, and really over time impact our ability to be productive, impact our ability to cope with stressors. We can move to the next slide. So it would be impossible to talk about mental health without talking about stress. Of course, stress has a profound impact on our mental health. And this slide sort of gives you kind of a very oversimplified perspective on stress and what's happening in our body. Really, there are two systems that are at work. The sympathetic nervous system, which I refer to as the on switch, and the parasympathetic, which is referred to as the off switch, right? The sympathetic nervous system becomes engaged when we are facing a stressor. And when the sympathetic nervous system is active, we experience all of those symptoms of stress that are that we all talk about, right? That rapid heart rate, sometimes body aches, digestion problems, right? This is basically our system, some parts shutting down and some parts activating, right? And really the sympathetic nervous system is designed to create that internal energy, that internal agitation to help us cope with that stressor, right? So stress in and of itself is neither good nor bad, right? It is just a normal part of life, right? The parasympathetic nervous system, the off switch, is our rest and repair part of our stress system, right? When the stressor has gone away, our body desires to repair, right? We need to have this time in repair. All these systems that shut down when we are facing the stressor come back on board, and our digestion normalizes, our heart rate levels off, right? We start to, our system starts to get back to center again. Both of these parts are necessary parts of stress, right? We have to have both. We have to have that activation in order for us to deal with the stressor, and we have to have the restoration and repair. You know, unfortunately, as we all can speak to, and certainly during COVID, we unfortunately spend far too much time in that activation phase and not nearly enough time in the rest and relaxation phase. And this ultimately throws us out of balance. So to really understand how our body is designed to work, let's move to the next slide. And again, when I talk about stress, I always talk about zebras. And if you've attended some of my workshops, you may have seen this slide or heard this part of my presentation before. But when I first began teaching about stress, I read a book by Robert Sapolsky called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. He is a psychologist who studies the stress response in animals in an attempt to really understand how our system works, and then compares it to the way humans experience stress. Well, looking at this slide, you can imagine these zebras are in a state of activation. They're being stalked by a predator, which is a very scary situation, right? So you can imagine what is going on inside of their body. Lots of agitation. You can see that they're staring at the lion. Their pupils are dilated. They are fixated on that stressor, right? They're hyper vigilant, trying to make sure that they respond appropriately to this stressor. And, you know, one of the things that we can say about again, the sympathetic nervous system is it creates that agitation, and that agitation is designed to get us to act. So what happens next in this situation? You can move to the next slide. What do the zebras do to cope with this stressor? They run, right? Their body has been primed for action, right? So they're now taking action. They are running away from the stressor. Their body is ready. The blood, you know, their blood is flowing. Their heart is beating fast, right? So now they're able to respond to this stressor. Well, let's just pause for a moment and think about human beings and one of the challenges we have as human beings. Think about all the times you are facing a stressful event, a stressful situation. Maybe it's a situation at work. Maybe you're having a difficult conversation with somebody. You're in a stressful meeting. When was the last time you were able to say, excuse me, I'm just going to go run around the block. I'll be right back. Let me just process my stress so that I can deal with what I'm facing here, right? Very rarely happens. Unfortunately, human beings are often forced to sit with that agitation, right? All this agitation is going on in their body, our bodies, and we're not able to take appropriate action. And this is when we often have those missteps where we might say something we don't mean. We might have an outburst. We may have some reaction to stress that is a response to this agitation, but not necessarily the most appropriate action we should be taking. Well, let's see what happens next for the zebras. So now they're running away from this lion. Here's what happens next. Oh, you can move the slide, Ashley. You did it. That was great. So here's where they wind up, right? They've gotten away from the lion. They're by the stream. They're just relaxing. They're drinking, not a care in the world, right? They're back. Their vision is back to panoramic view, right? They're able to see what's happening around them, not focused on anything in particular. Their parasympathetic nervous system is engaged. Their body is repairing itself, getting ready for that next stressor, right? This is how our stress response system is designed to work. Whether you're a zebra or a human being, it's the same, right? And so as you can imagine, if we don't allow ourselves to have this time in repair and restoration and relaxation, then our system stays in a state of hypervigilance. And what is the end result of that? You can move to the next slide. As I said, stress is neither good nor bad. What causes us challenges, difficulties, when we start to experience the ill effects of stress, it's because we are staying in that state of hypervigilance for an extended period of time without the balance of restoration, relaxation, right? Our body needs to go into that. The parasympathetic nervous system needs to be activated in order to repair ourselves. And as you can see from this chart, if we stay in a high stress for an extended period of time, the end result is exhaustion. And truly, this is what I heard more than anything during the COVID epidemic is I'm exhausted. I'm just exhausted, right? And we were exhausted before COVID, and then we added COVID, and now we're profoundly exhausted, right? So what do we do about that? You can move to the next slide. Because, you know, one of the things that is true about life is the stressors aren't going away. And I'm glad that you're attending this webinar, but I can tell you with certainty, I cannot do anything about your stressors, right? That I just can't, right? Stressors are going to appear. The lion is coming back, right? But as you remember, those zebras by the stream, one of the things they were not doing was worrying about the lion, right? They were not replaying the event in their mind. They weren't trying to predict when the lion was coming back, right? They were simply allowing their body to repair. One of the challenges we have as human beings is we tend to hyper focus on that stressor. We worry about the lion. We beat ourselves up for being confronted by the lion. We think that we should be able to handle the lion without feeling stress, right? These are all of the things that we as human beings do to exacerbate our stress, the internal experience of stress. And, you know, I mean, one of the things I hear often from people, you know, as an employee assistance program, people will come and see us and they'll say, I just need to vent, which is true. I mean, sometimes we need to tell our stories, right? We need to tell the story. We need to get it off our chest. But after a while, that venting becomes destructive because every time you're venting, you're replaying the stressful event, and the stress in your body is being reactivated, right? This is how we keep stress alive. So if we want to restore balance and protect our mental health, right? Remember that definition of mental health. We want to be productive. We want to handle the normal stressors of life. We want to continue to contribute and be part of a community. We do not want to isolate ourselves, right? So how do we do that? We need to let go of the stressor and focus on the stress. And by that, I mean, we need to turn our attention to what's happening inside our bodies. We need to get connected to what our physiological reaction is and how we can control it. And often, most people feel like, especially if they're having the experience of something like a panic attack, where their stress, bubbles up very quickly, and we have what is often referred to as a panic feeling. Most people in that situation don't believe they can control it. but it really truly is just a physiological reaction. And there are things you can do to calm that down. We're not going to get rid of the stressor, but we can calm the stress. And that ultimately is our goal in protecting our mental health. You can move to the next slide. It's a little bit like, imagine yourself sitting at the beach, right? And you're gazing off into the distance and your eyes are relaxed and you're just, you're not hyper focused on anything, and you're just giving your body a chance to restore, right? You can even do that now in this moment as we're sitting here together. I'm sure you might be staring at the computer. Maybe you're staring at your phone. Maybe you're checking your emails, maybe you're doing other things in addition to listening to me. But if you can pause for a moment and pick a spot anywhere. If you're by a window, gaze out the window. Just try to look off into the distance as far as you can, turning your face away from the computer, and just give yourself a few seconds to pause. Just take a breath, relax your eyes. Don't think about anything. Don't focus on anything, and just put yourself in that panoramic view, right? Just for a moment. And then bring yourself back to the computer and start looking at the computer again and notice the difference, right? That's portrait view. Portrait view is like us staring at our phone, right? It's when we narrow our gaze, just like the zebras, we're sort of narrowing their focus and hyper locked in on that lion, right? That's portrait view. Our eyes are the window to our stress response system. And so anytime our eyes get fixated on something, it activates our stress system, right? And so one of the best strategies that we can employ on a daily basis to manage our stress is shifting back and forth between these two states. And this is a challenge for many people, because what I hear often from employees is they get to work and they hit the ground running, right? I just want to get through the day. I'm going to work through lunch. I'm going to keep going so that I can leave 15 minutes early, right? The problem with that is if we are not giving our body adequate time to restore throughout the day, by the end of the day, we're reaching exhaustion. And once we've reached exhaustion, it takes longer to recover. So that's why often when we go home, if we're working in that manner, we feel like we can't do anything else, right? Our stress has reached this level. And now we're making bad decisions about our food. We're not exercising. We're declining invitations. We just want to sit on the couch and do nothing, right? We're circling the wagons just to kind of regroup and rejuvenate ourselves, right? If we actually practice going back and forth between these two states throughout the day, at the end of the day, we wind up with energy left over. Because every time we go into panoramic view, it sort of presses down those stress hormones, right? And increases something called acetylcholine. You do not need to remember that, but it increases neurotransmitters that help us keep going, right? There's Andrew Huberman, a professor from Stanford University. He studies this stress and studies professions like the military and surgeons, professions where they're doing a hard job for an extended period of time. And he finds that the individuals who seem to fare the best, who experience the least ill effects of stress, are those who have perfected going back and forth between these states multiple times a day for micro recoveries, right? Micro recoveries multiple times a day. And in that experience, they are insulating themselves from the stress and conserving their energy. You can move to the next slide. So what are we really talking about, right? The title of this workshop is Mental Health Habits to Last a Lifetime, because this sounds really great, right? Sure, I can do that. I can go back and forth between these two states, but how are you going to remember to do that, right? We get engaged in things, we get focused, we get driven, right? And we forget, right? We lose sight of what we're doing, and all of a sudden at the end of the day, we look back and we're like, what just happened to my day, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, we become whatever we repeat, right? We are a collection of needs and habits that are designed to meet those needs, right? And so as you can see from this slide, every time we are experiencing some type of emotional upset, and we grab that ice cream and we eat that ice cream, and guess what? It does work, right? It gives us a little boost of serotonin and maybe helps to alleviate that emotional distress for a period of time. Well, our brain likes that, likes things that work, and now we're going to repeat it, right? So now we're going to be driven to repeat it, right? This is ultimately, you know, at the end of the day, if you look back over your day, you are just performing one habit after another. And so many of these behaviors are happening at a subconscious level, right? So if we are going to design our day with mental health habits that help to restore us, we are going to have to be intentional. You can move to the next slide, which basically means we've got to move from that subconscious processing to conscious, right? So a habit is defined as a routine or practice performed regularly, and then it turns into an automatic response, right? So we have all these automatic responses going on throughout the day. Things that we do without thinking, like brushing our teeth. We don't have to give that very much thought, because we know when we're going to do it, where we're going to do it. We have the equipment to do it, right? It's become so much a part of our daily routine that we don't need to think about it. Well, if we're going to improve our mental health, we are going to have to think about it. We are going to have to be intentional about designing, and that's the key word. We have to design these habits and then figure out how do we implement them on a daily basis. You can move to the next slide. So one of the biggest challenges we have, you can move to the next slide. One of the biggest challenges we have with implementing a new habit is we sometimes will make it too hard, or it's not always obvious, right? So if you are trying to, let's just say you're trying to implement, you're trying to develop a reading habit. Maybe reading relaxes you, right? And so you have a book and you really like that book, and your goal is to read at the end of the day, okay? Now you go into your room, you lay in bed, and you think, where is my book, right? It's not in an obvious position. It's nowhere obvious. You might have to search for it, right? And in that moment, you're probably going to say, oh, forget it, I'll do it tomorrow, right? Now let's imagine you climb into bed, that book is sitting right next to you on your nightstand, exactly where you want to be reading it, right? You're in bed, there's your book, it's obvious, that's a cue, right? Now it's your cue, oh, there's my book, this is something I want to do, I'm going to pick that up and I'm going to read my book. This is how we help ourselves design good habits, right? We make the cues obvious. Let's say you want to develop an exercise. Maybe you want to walk every day. You've designed this habit. You're going to walk every day to help lower your stress level and improve your physical well-being. But your workout gear or your walking shoes are you can't find them. Or maybe you get in your car and they're in the house. Or you wake up, maybe you want to walk in the morning, but you have to search for your shoes, right? Or whatever you're going to wear to walk, right? This makes it more challenging. and we might forget, right? But let's say the night before you lay out, okay, this is my workout clothing. I'm going to go for a walk. All my stuff is right here. I wake up. There it is. Here's my cue. I'm going to put my clothes on. Now I'm going to go for a walk, right? This is a basic principle of developing new habits, is you want to make the cues really obvious. If you're trying to develop a habit of eating maybe more whole foods, maybe more fruits or vegetables, right? But the fruits and vegetables are buried in your refrigerator, right? It's going to be harder for you to implement this habit because it's not going to be obvious. But if you have that bowl of fruit sitting on your island where you walk by every single day, there's your cue. I struggle with this when it comes to taking my supplements. I must have my supplements on the counter. Those cues have to be obvious or I will forget every single day, right? And it has nothing to do with my competence, with my willpower, with anything. It's the cue was not obvious. You can move to the next slide. The other principle that is so important is making it easy, right? Again, my vitamins are on the counter. Even better is if I get one of those little containers and I set them out, for the entire week. Now it's just easy. I lift up, I pop one lid, take them, done, right? This is a really important concept when it comes to developing new habits. Way too often we make things too hard and then we beat ourselves up, right? We say, what's wrong with us? Why can't we do this? I should be able to do this, right? And for most of us, I would say, the majority of us, when we have good intentions and we design a habit and we make it too hard, we are totally relying on our willpower alone. And what is far more effective is creating a system that supports us. People who have really good habits do not have better willpower than you. They just have a better system, right? People who take their vitamins every day, they probably have a system. People who exercise every day, they have a system, right? And that's really what we're talking about when it comes to designing and implementing habits. We've got to be thinking about, how do we make these cues right in front of us? How do we make it easy? How do we create a system that supports us, right? If I'm talking about going back and forth between portrait view and panoramic view, and you're sitting and staring at the computer most of the day, okay, let's take an example of what could you do? What kind of system could you create for yourself to remind you to take a break? We got a phone right here that has an alarm, right? We can set reminders. We can do things, and that's a lot of apps work that way, right? They send us messages. Don't forget to walk, right? Your Fitbit. That's really what it's about, is trying to create a system that takes that automatic behavior and raises it to conscious awareness. You can move to the next slide. So let's think about a few very simple strategies that, when done every day, multiple times a day, can have a profound impact on your stress level, improving, decreasing your stress overall. I will, in a couple of slides, I'm going to talk about meditation, mindful meditation. And at Preferred EAP, we actually we oversee the Lehigh Valley Health Network Center for Mindfulness, and we are blessed to have many wonderful programs. But when people are experiencing high levels of stress, it is often difficult for them to meditate because, as we all know, kind of thinking back to those zebras who are so lucky to not have these racing thoughts as they're hanging out by the stream, we human beings, we often struggle with those racing thoughts. And so when somebody says, go ahead and sit in meditation and calm yourself, and those thoughts are racing, sometimes it becomes more distressing, right? So I always like to begin with the breath, because the breath is always operating in the present moment. Our breath helps us understand what's actually happening in the environment if we tune into it. And I'm going to go over two very simple strategies to manage your breath, because our breath is what we actually have the most control over. Remember, the stressor is the lion, the stress is what's happening in our body, right? So managing our breath is managing our stress. So I want to start with a very simple one called coherent breathing. And it basically balances the input with output, right? We're counting, we're breathing into the same count as we are exhaling. And ideally, the best relaxation breath is a count of 5. 5 in, 5 out, right? It slows our breathing down to a point where we start to feel relaxed. It's not easy for everybody. If you don't spend a lot of time focused on your breathing, it may take you a little while to get to that 5 to 5. So you can start, at 4 to 4. You can start where it feels comfortable for you. Many of you might have an Apple Watch. I believe the Apple Watch has something similar to the breathing app. I'm going to show you. This is my favorite app. It is a circle that, and it's a free app. It's called the breathing app. And if you download it, you can set it to the cadence that you prefer. And in this case, I'll just play it for you. It's set 5 to 5. And it expands and contracts. And I believe like Fitbit or Apple has something similar, right? So I want to take a moment and practice. Mine's also has sound, if you can hear it. I want to give you the practice of 5 coherent breaths. So whatever you're doing, you can just pause for a moment and focus on your breathing. And the goal here is to count 5 in and 5 out. And so right now I'm just going to follow this circle. And we'll get ready. We're contracting. And now we're going to take an inhale. If you follow me. I'm going to pause there. That was 5 simple breaths, right? They do not have to be super deep, right? It's really just about concentrating on slowing your breathing down. And hopefully in that 5 breaths, you began to experience how quickly our body shifts into that relaxation mode. And that takes about a minute, if that. And imagine doing that multiple times a day for 1 minute or maybe 2 minutes. And just think about how that would feel in your body by the end of the day, right? So again, it is about intentionality. It is about that intentional pause and putting ourselves in panoramic view, right? Relaxing our gaze. This is probably best done with eyes closed or maybe staring out into the distance, right? 5 breaths to the count of 5. That's a coherent breath. The other breath I want to teach you is called the physiological sigh. And once again, going back to Andrew Huberman, professor at Stanford University, this is something that he actually studies, the physiological sigh. It is something that we often do automatically. If you have pets and they are sleeping, you will observe them doing this type of breath automatically. It is something our body does. It's sort of like a reset button. It is the type of breath that has the quickest, most effective impact on our stress, right? Let me teach it to you. The physiological sigh is a double inhale with a long exhale. And why is that double inhale important? Well, when we inhale at the beginning, it's like we're filling our lungs. Okay, so we're filling our lungs, and now we're going to take another inhale. And you might be able to feel the difference in your body because the first inhale inflates our lungs. The second inhale inflates all of those little tiny sacs called the alveoli that are attached to our lungs. So what is happening is we are increasing our oxygen intake beyond that initial breath, right? So it's a double inhale, long exhale. And again, this is the quickest way to reset the physiological response we're having to stress. And a lot of, I know for myself, when I'm running and I run up a hill and I'm finding that I'm having a hard time breathing, I will do this breath 2 or 3 times to sort of regulate me, right? It happens very quickly and it's very effective. But again, it's something that we have to remember to do and be intentional about, right? You can move to the next slide. So back to the coherent breathing, this is an example of what's going on in your body. The red line represents you engaging in the practice, and you can see what's going on with respiration, heart rate variability, and blood pressure. It's basically just syncing everything up, right? That's why it's called coherent breathing. And if you follow heart math and you add a feeling of gratitude to that breath, you will notice that the effects amplify, right? So 5 breaths with that feeling of gratitude, maybe 5, 6 times a day, right? It's a great place to start. That's considered a new habit. New habits shouldn't be too hard. They should be easy to administer. They should be intentional until we get to the point of them being automatic. You can move to the next slide. Now let's talk about mindfulness, right? Mindfulness, as you can see from the slide, the definition, it's basically about awareness, right? It's not about stopping your thoughts. Most people think meditation means you're not supposed to be thinking. Impossible. Our brain is always working, and our brain is designed to generate thoughts. So mindfulness is about awareness. Oh my gosh, my mind is racing. That's awareness. Oh, I'm feeling sort of heavy in my chest, or maybe I have a little bit of a headache, or maybe I'm noticing a lot of noise going on in the background. Awareness, right? So it's the practice of awareness of what's happening around you in the present moment. That's it. That's all mindfulness is about. And the key component is awareness in a non-judgmental manner. Not, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why are my thoughts racing? Why can't I stop thinking about this thing, right? Why? That is not mindfulness. That is judgment, right? And every time we engage in that judgment, that self-deprecating judgment, we exacerbate our stress. So mindfulness is really the discipline, the practice of bringing yourself back to the present moment, right? We all know our thoughts tend to drift toward the future or replaying the past, right? And so the awareness is just catching that and bringing ourselves back. That's it. And if you are interested in exploring mindful meditation, I know for Mental Health Month, at least for LVHN, I think we've opened it up to all of our corporate customers as well. But we are offering something called mindfulness on the spot multiple times. If you look at the mental health, May's mental health calendar at LVHN, you should find those. And the mindfulness on the spot is just a 45-minute introduction, gives you an intro and some basic practices that you can try. And if you like that and you want more, you can go to the next level, which is growing resilience with mindfulness. That is a six-week class, 90 minutes each session. Mostly, I think right now we're just doing that virtually. And then we have the gold standard, which is the mindfulness-based stress reduction. That is the most intensive experience of mindfulness, 2.5 hours each class, an 8-week program with a retreat at the end. Now, that may seem like a lot, right? And you may say, I don't have time for that. Well, all of those are about formal mindful practice. Let's talk more about informal mindfulness practice. You can move to the next slide. When we talk about informal practice, we're really just talking about, moments, integrating moments of pause. And the best way to do that is to begin with familiar objects or familiar experiences, things that we're doing already every day. I showed a slide earlier with us brushing our teeth. That's an opportunity for informal mindfulness. We're already brushing our teeth, right? Couldn't we at that moment just pause and focus on how are we breathing, bring ourselves to the present moment, be aware of how the toothbrush feels on our teeth, just the sensations of the toothpaste or the water, right? These are things that we're already doing every day that we can pair a moment of mindfulness with them. And I love the stop sign, right? A stop sign is often a source of agitation, right, for many of us, or certainly a red light is, right? But if we can reframe it and see it as an opportunity, when we run into that stop sign, take it as an opportunity for a mindful moment. We're going to stop. We're going to take a breath. We're just going to observe what's happening in our body, right? And we're going to proceed with self-compassion. Because if we become aware that, geez, I'm really feeling tired today, or my body feels achy, or I'm noticing that I'm worrying a lot, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever is happening in your body, if you proceed with self-compassion, it's an opportunity for you to restore yourself. If you proceed with self-judgment, you're exacerbating your stress. Right? So the self-compassion is a really critical part of mindfulness, really important part, right? It's about being aware in a non-judgmental manner and being kind to ourselves so that we are able to restore our bodies. You can move to the next slide. So if you, as you have been listening to me, if you have begun to think about small habits that you can implement every day that would help to support or improve your mental health, one of the best ways for you to guarantee that you will do it is to write down an implementation intention. Most habits are connected, are grounded in time and place, time of day, and where are you going to perform it. And that's why brushing our teeth is such a great habit. Morning, time, place, bathroom, right? Happens the same way every single day, right? So if you are thinking about a habit, you want to think about what is the time and place that I can do it. Maybe there is a traffic light that you encounter every day on your way to work that almost inevitably is red, right? Or you it's inevitable that you're going to sit in traffic, right? Or something that happens every day, okay? Time and place. When I'm sitting at that traffic light, I am in the morning, right? We have the time, traffic light, place. I am going to take 5 breaths. Or maybe you won't have enough time. I'm going to take at least 2 slow breaths, right? There you go. There's a new habit. You have a time and a place. You're connecting it with something that's already happening every day. That is by far the most effective way for you to start a new habit. You can move to the next slide. So let's bring this into the workplace, right? Because we spend, unfortunately for many of us, way more time at work than we even spend with our families, right? And our work family knows us sometimes better than our family in some ways. So it's really important that we think about, how do we do this at work, right? And so it begins with you really evaluating, what are you already doing every day at work, right? Now, maybe you work remotely, and this is even more critical for you to be thinking about this, because when you work remotely, you're missing a lot of organic moments that used to exist when you worked in the office, right? And for many of us, we're working in isolation. So we're missing that feedback loop. We're not observing others taking care of themselves, right? It's just us, right? So we need to really be clear about, what are we doing every day? And think about pairing some type of mindful moment with that routine. I met with a physician once who shared the story. He had actually taken the mindfulness classes, and his informal mindfulness practice was, when he would go from room to room, he'd put his hand on the doorknob, something he has to do every day, multiple times a day. And that was his cue. I'm putting my hand on the doorknob. That's my cue. And in this moment, I'm just going to pause for 30 seconds. I'm just going to focus on my breathing, maybe engage in some positive self-talk, right? Do something that is related to self-compassion. Be kind to myself before opening the door, right? And that was his routine. That was his mindful moment, practiced multiple times a day. So easy to do, but it centered him multiple times. Portrait view, panoramic view, multiple times a day, right? Using external triggers to help you remember to pause. His external trigger was the doorknob. Put signs up. If a stop sign resonates for you, put a stop sign somewhere in a key place. Put objects around you that remind you to pause, right? It's really important to help us remember. We are subconscious beings. We are habit machines, right? We operate on a subconscious level because we have to. If we were consciously aware of every single solitary thing we were doing, we would be completely exhausted. Our brains cannot handle that, right? So use external triggers to help you pause. One of the greatest triggers I like, cues, is meetings, right? We spend a lot of time in meetings. We get on virtual meetings very often, right? That can be your cue. I'm on this meeting, I'm in this meeting, mindful moment. How do you want to start every meeting? It should be with something that gets you centered, right? That puts you in panoramic view, if it's not, even if it's just for 30 seconds. Okay, everybody, before we start the meeting, let's just pause for a moment, close your eyes, take some deep breaths, right? Before we come back together and focus on the work at hand, right? That is really important for us to do. And it's a way for us to support one another. And it's a way for us to basically value mental health, to send the message that we value mental health and that everybody has mental health. Everybody, right? And everybody needs this. It is not unique to one person over another. It is not a sign of weakness. We all need this. You can move to the next slide. So I cannot talk about mental health without also talking about some of the continued challenges we have with taking care of our mental health, right? I have been a clinician for 30 years, and I can't believe it's been that long, but it has. And I have seen over that time, mental health has changed, right? At the beginning of my career, we just did not talk about it, right? It was like pulling teeth. Nobody talked about mental health. And if you did, you kept it private, you kept it hidden, right? You just didn't talk about it, right? It is much better than when I first began my career, but we still have a long way to go, right? And so truly, one of the most powerful ways that you can take care of your own mental health, but also support the mental health of everyone around you, is by sharing your own experiences, right? And this is particularly true for leaders, because leaders set the tone. And if leaders are afraid to talk about emotions, feelings, mental health, guess what? Your people are going to think they're not allowed to talk about it either. So I like to end our time together by talking about my own experience with mental health, right? I'm a clinician. I work with clinicians. I'm very supportive of mental health. But even though I've worked in such a supportive environment, I too have struggled with this. I too have felt afraid to share for fear of being judged. You can move to the next slide, Ashley. So I took this picture and I want to share it with you. This is a picture of the adolescent treatment program at Caron Foundation, which is a drug and alcohol treatment program. And I took this picture the day that I dropped my adolescent son. He's now an adult and doing fine, by the way. I always want to, put in that caveat that it's been a long journey and he's doing really well. But on this day, I dropped him off for a 30-day treatment program. And it was the first day in a long time. We had been struggling for several years. It was the first moment where I actually felt like I can breathe because he's somewhere safe. But then the next thought that crept in is, what do I do now? What do I do now? Who do I talk to about this? Do I put this picture on Facebook and say, please pray for my son who is struggling with mental health and a substance abuse problem? Is that what I should do? Right? I mean, I see those messages all the time when someone is ill, physically ill. You go on social media and we're all praying for them. People are making food for them, right? But when it comes to mental health, what kicked in for me right away is, what will they think of my son? What will they think of me? Will they ostracize me? Will they think I'm a bad parent? Right? All of these thoughts came racing in. Right? And so I talked to my closest friend. There were only a couple of people who knew what was going on in my life. And I just put on a happy face at work. Right? And nobody knew what was going on. Right? It took me quite a while before I felt comfortable talking about it, probably until my son, I felt comfortable that he was doing well. And I regret that. And I regret that because I suffered in silence for way too long. And I often think about, well, what if somebody had shared their experience? Maybe they were going through something similar and they had shared it. I would have immediately gravitated to them and said, oh my gosh, I'm going through the same thing. And often what happens as a result of me sharing this is people will reach out to me and say, I'm going through the same thing, right? And ultimately, that is what we want. We want to create a culture where we are all accepting of our common humanity. We all struggle with mental health. We all have to be very intentional about nurturing our mental health. It is what makes us all the same, right? And so having the courage, which it does take courage. And even now when I talk about it, I still am not always sure what kind of reaction I will get. But I know that I have to. I know that it's important for me because I don't want to hide it. And I know it's important for everyone around me because I don't want them to hide it. I want them to know that they have support and that they're not alone, right? And ultimately, when we want to create work environments that support mental health, that's what it has to be. right? People need to feel comfortable sharing. They need to feel comfortable, right? Leaders need to be comfortable talking about the employee assistance program. They need to be comfortable saying, hey, I've used that service and it really helped me with this, and I think it might benefit you as well. You know, that is where we need to get to, and we're still not there. We're better than we used to be, but we're still not there. And so that is always my wish for Mental Health Month, is that we continue to be aware of the challenges that we all face with mental health, but also that mental health unites us all, right? It's part of our common humanity, and we all play a role no matter what. Whether you actually are struggling with something that would be considered a mental illness, or you're just trying to, you know, do the best for yourself every day and improve your habits, right? It's a spectrum, but we all are the same in that we are, at the end of the day, we want to be productive. We want to be part of a community. We want to be able to manage our lives day to day and deal with the daily stresses of life. So with that, we can move to the next slide. I'm happy to take questions if there are any questions, and I'm going to see if I can open the question tab. But Ashley, if you, I don't see anything in there, but if anybody does have a question or a comment, anything you wanted to share, please feel free to do so. One common question that I get at EAP that I will address is, again, going back to that hybrid work environment, right? And in, I was just sharing with Ashley that in August, I'm hoping to conduct a webinar on loneliness based on the Surgeon General's report about the epidemic of loneliness, right? One of the biggest impacts we're seeing on mental health is that lack of community, right? Not being in the office, we are missing all those small moments of walking past somebody and smiling. Hey, how are you? Right? All those moments, those little mini organic moments, have disappeared for many of us who work remotely, right? And so we now have to be so much more intentional about our well-being than we were before, right? Because we've got to somehow replace those moments. And the best way for us to do that is to create opportunities for us to gather, even if it's in the virtual space, but to gather around opportunities for connection, not just related to work tasks, right? We should have on the agenda the first couple minutes, moments of connection, or opportunities to connect, or opportunities to share, something that replicates those organic moments that have disappeared for many of us, right? This is the challenge we have going forward with our mental health, is being able to create those communities, feel as though we're being productive, feel as though we're connected, feel as though we're being supported in some way. I think we're at 6:28. It's like, thank you for this presentation. You're very welcome. It's my pleasure and my privilege to be here with you. And as I said, we will be sending out the recording. Feel free to share it with whoever you like. We usually post this on our website. You know what, Ashley, can you move to the next slide? I do want to highlight the fact that we at Preferred EAP, we do have a new website. We are part of the Populitics.com website. Preferred EAP is a subpage. We used to have our own website, but now we've been integrated into the Populitics website. There's more information available. We're continuing to, you know, we just launched it a few weeks ago. If you're having any trouble with it, please let us know. If there's something that you would like to see on our website that's not currently there, please let us know. We're constantly trying to improve and give you greater access to virtual resources. So we will be posting, you know, we post our webinars on the website so that you can watch them at your leisure and share them with whoever you think might benefit. So. Anything else? Did I miss anything? I just closed the question tab. Okay. With that, we are at time. Thank you so much for being here with me. And as always, if you need anything, more information, have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Take care. I hope you have a wonderful evening.